Hi, folks, and good evening or good late afternoon, I guess. Welcome to another episode with Jim O'Connell here at Education Matters, where we discuss all things education and sometimes a little more here in the wonderful city of Manchester. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I said a couple of words, I think, in the end, at the end of the last program about the things we have to be thankful for, and it sounds like platitudes sometimes, but it is a wonderful holiday. Actually, I guess all holidays are good, right? We suffer generally from not having enough of them. I wish we had more. There's some long periods of the year where it stretches out without a holiday, a public holiday at least. But anyway, Thanksgiving was wonderful. For those of us who have, and others who have family who live away, in my case, students who study away, it was great to see so many people back home. My own family back home was a wonderful thing. Also, because some of my kids are of that age now that they're in college, so a lot of the kids that they hang around with were all home from schools, etc. as well. So it was a lively few days with lots of fun and much to recommend it. I've noticed that over time that Thanksgiving takes on a different aura or a different importance, or at least a different the holiday changes depending on where you are in your life. I'm reminded of when couples first get married and they're buying a house. There are a set of things they would like in their house, and then whatever that may be, and then along comes maybe before one has kids, it's that we need a house where we can have parties, so there's room to circulate, and then a kid or two comes along, and now I need a playroom, and I need whatever else I might need, and the backyard is going to look different than it did before, and as one goes through life, these things continually change, and then you end up perhaps in sort of the empty nest syndrome, which thankfully we haven't, in my house, haven't quite arrived at yet, but we're getting there, where you think, what do we do with all this space now? And I think Thanksgiving's a bit like that. It certainly has been for me over the years. That this newer phase for me is the fact that having my children who lived under my roof and were there every night, the sudden departure as they head off to work or college or wherever they go, and so now having them back is just a special blessing and pleasure. So. I have a hell of a lot to be grateful for, and I'm sure we all do in one way or another. We had a school board meeting last night, and I don't know whether I should regret or I should be thankful for the fact that I didn't get to, I couldn't go to it, and I couldn't get to watch it on TV. I have been told by some who did watch it that it was again quite the event, and I don't know, what one needs to do to sort of fix this. In this case, I'm talking about something I heard about and also read something about, so I don't have first-hand knowledge, but I've heard it described, in different ways, but none of them complimentary. That the school board seems to get involved in interminable discussions about matters that don't always involve, or maybe perhaps even seldom involve, kids, classrooms, teachers, schools, books, supplies, etc. And so you would imagine that at a time where we have teachers working without a contract, for not for the first time in recent years, that might be something that would focus the mind, where we may well, as we're speaking right now, families are making decisions about their future, etc. And if you're a teacher in the city of Manchester and you haven't had, you went without a pay adjustment or pay increase for a number of cycles 3 years ago, and now you're back in this again. If your steps have been stopped, and that's, when for those of you, and I'm sure many of you understand, but in Manchester there are 14 steps. So we start off with teachers at around $35,000 a year, and the only way we can, or one of the ways we get people to agree to work for $35,000 a year, having gone to university, gotten a degree in education, perhaps having gotten a master's degree, and to have student debt, etc., and to come back and to work in Manchester or in a school. One of the things we offer them is this idea that, look, we can't pay you more than this $35,000 to start off, but if you stay here and you work each year you're here, we'll get you further up the ladder. And so eventually, if you get to the 14th year, it tops out at somewhere around the 70,000 mark or 75,000 mark. That's if you're fully qualified with full degrees and masters, etc. So that's the short version of it. And of course, if you are there and you let me just turn this off. If you're there and you're relying on these steps, and they don't come, you've got a mortgage, perhaps you've got other expenses, plus you've got other opportunities, and real people make real decisions based on real facts. And however you read the tea leaves in the city of Manchester, there's a perception that education is undervalued here, and teachers are certainly they look, you look 14 miles north, and you see that just yesterday the board in Concord voted to give their teachers a pay increase, not just a pay increase in terms of keeping up with inflation or GDP numbers, but to actually give them an increase. That was a unanimous vote. The entire public representatives, so all the public representatives on the board in Concord voted in favour of that pay increase. We saw a similar episode or thing happen in Nashua last year. And so it behooves the point, it begs the point. What's the story with Manchester? Now, I'm sure there are negotiations going on and that people are working on it. It's not an easy problem. So long as we're still tied to property taxes, that's always a tough nut to crack. In the end, though, the realities are the realities. We have to pay for the services that we use. And so whatever the situation is with regard to negotiations, why we can't bring it to some closure so we have some certainty, I don't know, but I really wish we could get off this. We can't get to have a conversation about the future of Manchester, and it's an attractive place, and it's a place where families should come and they should send their kids to schools, etc. Those conversations can't happen until we get rid of some of the unknowns. Now, in that regard, at last night's meeting, there was an article in the Manchester Inklink, and I have to give a shout out to Manchester Inklink because it's an online where have I got it here somewhere? Let me see. It's an online what would you call it? A newspaper, for want of a word. Then I'm sure there's a better word today. But it covers the city of Manchester, and it's at manchesterinklink.com, INKLINK, so inklink.com, and they're doing a wonderful job and have gotten better and better over time. And with all due respects to my friends at the Union Leader, there was a time when I looked at Manchester Inklink as being not to offend anybody, but the sort of paper of record for the city of Manchester was the Union Leader, and then there were others who put stuff up on blogs and things, and lo and behold, I find Manchester Inklink a wonderful source of sort of breaking news in Manchester. If there's a police incident or a fire incident or a kid gone missing, or I don't know, a cat stuck on a roof, whatever it might be, the likelihood is that it will hit online immediately on Inklink, or very close to immediately. So kudos to them. They're doing a wonderful job. And with regard to last night, there's a piece on there last night about last night's meeting, which actually was written by, if I can find the gentleman, I'd like to give him, Andrew Sylvia. And this went up. I saw it this morning, but he says it says 5 key roll call votes from Monday's Board of School Committee, or BOSC, meeting in Manchester. It sounds like it was quite contentious. Roll call votes are usually called for, not, obviously when there's unanimity. There isn't any need for a roll call vote or one person in dissent, but roll call votes are usually required when or asked for when somebody wants to put somebody else on record as having as having voted for or against a particular proposal. Of those issues last night, there were one of them was actually on the issue of roll call votes, and a proposal was made by, let me see if a proposal was made that roll call votes, that was from the Ward 2 school board member Dave Scannell, citing a recent announcements from the representatives of the New Hampshire Union Leader that they could not obtain roll call votes until public access television replayed them several days later, requested that roll call votes become available the day after any meeting on the district's website, so that the district would put on a history of, or a declaration of, any roll call votes that had been held, and they would go on the following day. Now, it would seem to me that in the interests of openness and clarity and etc., that seemed like a pretty reasonable request or proposal. And so, however, it got wrapped up in the subject that we discussed last week about how the school board had discussed extending or creating a new contract. Currently, the superintendent, Dr. Vargas, is on a 2-year contract, or halfway through a 2-year contract. And so a proposal to change his contract to 5 years was discussed, and it was done late at night after an in-camera session. So nobody was around, no press was around, the item wasn't on the agenda, and again, it was Dave Scannell who raised the topic and said, this is sort of shoddy, that school board shouldn't be taking decisions like this. And I thought the most salient of his points was, and the most important was, that having while I think there's pretty much unanimity, thankfully, and I think correctly, that Dr. Vargas, our superintendent, is the right man for the job and is doing a commendable job at what he's doing. So it wasn't about the superintendent in particular. At least that was never. I don't think it was even left unstated. It was most people declared themselves to be satisfied with his, and more than satisfied with his efforts. And part of the rationale for proposing that a 5-year contract be offered and signed with Dr. Vargas was in case he would decide to move elsewhere, if he were to get a more generous offer elsewhere and would move on. And so that was the rationale given. And the one of the points made by Committeeman Scannell, other than the point that it was being done late at night, wasn't on the agenda, hadn't been announced, there'd be no discussion. His point also was that it was binding to future committees, Board of School committees, to a contract with a superintendent that they had no say in hiring, and if they found themselves dissatisfied with his performance at any time, except for, of course, for a cause, when somebody can be eliminated for breaking their contract. But if it were simply a matter of dissatisfaction and preference, in order to remove any such future superintendent, a school board would likely have to pay the 5 years of the contract. So if after this current board were to leave and Dr. Vargas had a 5-year contract just signed, and the incoming board in less than a year from now were to find themselves, or in a year from now, were to find themselves wanted to make a change, they'd have to pay 5 times or whatever was remaining of the salary, etc. So that was the argument. Well, sadly, last night's discussion about roll call votes being published within the day of they happening. So whatever votes would happen last night would be put on the school board website the following day. So all of us mere plebs out in the public who are not part of the decision-making process directly, that we would get to know how our public representatives had voted. I'm surprised that it was as controversial as it was. I'm just going by the reports on here. Committeeman Gerard made a motion to receive and file the requested rule change to prevent immediate action on the proposal change, and instead noted had been heard. Gerard explained that the audio of the meeting was available quickly, also challenging recent allegations about a discussion related to renewing the contract, blah, blah, blah. And then Mr. Beaudry added that to Mr. Gerard's comments relating to transparency during the recent Vargas contract. So they got wrapped up in this other issue, I guess. Mayor Craig questioned the relevancy of the whole conversation because it was a simpler matter about should roll call votes, and this because they wouldn't require, I guess a reason would be they wouldn't require editorial, right? It would be the motion. You could do this because you could simply take the motion that was proposed and then just simply state whether the motion was passed or not, and then list the yeas and the nays. And so there's no need for a journalistic effort here, or editorial comment, or people arguing about, say, the minutes of a meeting, which are a different thing, where people might have a difference of opinion about what the minutes state. This is a very simple, I would have thought it was a simple thing, and I certainly would have supported it had I been at the table. However, there was after the vote did not pass. So the vote did not pass due to a lack of a majority. It was moved to discussion by committee by a voice vote, and so the vote to on the original motion to do this and put those roll call votes, it was 7-7. And so the 7 in favour were Gerard, Theriault, Lehoux, Beaudry, Avard, George and Freeman. And those who were against were Craig, DeRochers, Long, Ambrosi, Scannell, Want and Bergeron. Sorry, this is the vote to have it moved to committee. So That seemed like that would have been a very simple vote. I thought Mr. Scannell made a point, and sadly got wrapped up on other things. Another one of the votes from last night had to let me see. So then there was the vote on this on the so-called HOPE program, and this program I am. I don't understand what's complicated about the whole program. To be clear, and I've said it already, I am not in favour of the whole program being simply pushed through. I think, and it's not just a process thing. I spoke with a school board member in the last couple of weeks about this issue, and they were under the misconception that I was actually opposing just the process. I oppose more than the process, but I start with the process. The idea that a program was originally funded by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for the school system without consulting the school district is a problem to me. One of my fundamental problems with it is that the whole program, first of all, is not a program. It's an individual. It may have a 501(c) listing in the state of New Hampshire. So, but effectively, it is one gentleman well-intentioned, who wants to help with kids who are having difficulty in the school system. My problem isn't with that particular gentleman. My problem is that this is not the right way for going about this, and it's not clear that that this is the most effective way of doing it. And lastly, we need real solutions in the city of Manchester, and I'm sick to the teeth of postage stamp and half-baked ideas and whatever the glittery object of the day is, whatever shiny draws the attention of people like they have some kind of attention deficit disorder. And so in this case, I imagine, for instance, or you might imagine, that if the Board of School Committee were to find $15,000 and eventually $25,000 and fund a program at the to do something in the Parks Department, or to do something with the roads in the city. So let's say there are potholes in the roads, and despite what Kevin Shepherd might have giving Kevin Shepherd no say one way or the other, or anybody else, and the school district decides that it's going to start bring in a private contractor with no qualifications, by the way, to start filling potholes outside each of the schools. That'd be a pretty rude way to do it. And if they did it by breaking procedures, that would be pretty rude. And if it turned out that the unqualified contractor who was actually given the job happened to be a close relative of one of the board members taking the vote and pushing it, that'd be particularly problematic. Now this, by the way, to use the word problematic again, is a bit of a problem for me, because many of the people supporting the whole project are people that I would normally be very supportive of, and I don't question for a minute that their motives are not the best. But I don't like the idea of railroading something through or ramrodding something through and forcing it on the citizens, and forcing the citizens to pay for something that that has not been properly vetted, or hasn't been proven, or hasn't gone through the normal channels for approving something. The history of the Hope program, as it's now called, is the history of one gentleman who has been at this for some time. I don't want to be unkind, but sometimes without great success, sometimes with failure, and all that's happened is we've taken this and shined it up by calling it a program, and now we talk about we have a program in place for 15 kids. Well, we have 14,000 kids in this district, and we have thousands of them that need help. I have no doubt in my mind that any time you take some resources, a person or money, and you put it into a school system to help kids in need, that there are benefits. But when you just go out and you find somebody who is, again, well-intentioned and obviously passionate about what they want to do, and you decide you're going to ram this through as this will be the thing, I think about where money couldn't be found in the past for so many things. There were a number of people came forward at the last school board meeting and spoke about the effect that this Mr. C had on them, and I can see that would be moving and convincing for some. I don't question their sincerity either. I also, though, look at the numbers as they were published and the results of, whether kids' truancy was reduced, whether their incidents with disciplinary actions were reduced, whether their academic outcomes were improved, and I would call those results pretty iffy from this so-called program, from having spent some time with this gentleman. But I think about just a year ago at MST, there was a reduction, a significant reduction in the catering program at MST. Now, I'm using the example not because I want to say that should be refunded or something. I think people sat there and saw this go on, but person after person after person after person came before the Board of School Committee, many of them in tears, and there were business owners who said they had a problem hiring qualified people in their kitchens and bars, etc., in the city of Manchester and beyond, and that the program at MST was an important source of employees for them. Young person after young person, I mean people 17, 16, 18, 19, 20 and above who had gone through the program. The gentleman whose job was being eliminated had clearly done a wonderful job. People spoke with passion. I was deeply moved by the large number of people who said that this is how they'd gotten through school, that this is the skill that they had, that they wouldn't be working in the jobs they were working in now. And it was from half the restaurants in Manchester. And they wouldn't have the jobs and the careers that they have now in baking or bar work or restaurants or cooking or whatever without this gentleman. And that program was eliminated because for whatever reason, right? It was eliminated. That was just last year, and that was a proven program that we couldn't afford to continue because we couldn't justify it based on numbers, etc. When I look at the programs that have been dropped all across the city, it makes my blood boil, actually, that a committee like the Board of Aldermen, who have obstinately, as a group, over the years, remained willfully ignorant about what's going on in our schools. I get so tired of talking to people I am very friendly with and people I know less well, but constantly listening to aldermen saying to me, oh, they over there do this and what they need to do is this, and it's all they. There's a huge divide between the aldermen and the school board. Most of the aldermen know close to nothing about the school district and how it works. They don't know it, they don't understand it. Now, if you talk to them, by the way, to my friends out there who are firefighters and police, etc., this is not a knock against them at all. I would be the strongest fighter at any time for the fire department or the police department or the other public employees in the city of Manchester when they're getting a raw deal, and they often do. But the fact is that if there's a reduction in force at the fire department or at the police department of 2 people or half a shift or whatever it might be, this is not. The fact is that aldermen seem to have this intimate knowledge of, Truck 7, that's over there, and when that was bought in 2006, it was supposed to last for 10 years, and we were promised it would be changed, and, Truck 6 over here, and Rescue 1 there, and the captain there was moved there, and so, which is wonderful. I think that's great that our aldermen pay attention to the departments and make sure they're properly looked after, which they don't always do. My point is that you've got 1,000 employees in the school system, and you've got 20-something schools, some of them multiple buildings, and there are aldermen who wouldn't know one side of the school from the other. And I would go so far as to say that there are aldermen who couldn't even find some of those schools, or at least would have difficulty driving to them. So the level of ignorance on behalf of board of mayor and alderman members about the school district is just palpable and obvious. So they have sat idly by for years while I have gone before them, superintendents have gone before them, administrators have gone before them, public groups have gone before them. Everybody, one after the other, has gone before the board, the aldermanic committee, and said to them, we cannot continue to underfund our school system. And I go in there, I think sometimes I'm the bearer of bad tidings when I go in and tell them, because nobody wants to spell it out. Nobody wants to say on there, Democrat or Republican, liberal, progressive, conservative, whatever they are. Once they're in the seat, nobody wants to say, I'm sitting here in charge of downsizing and I'm not giving people what they need and I'm not looking after the voters properly and, oh, no, we're going to shine it all up now. Once people get on that board, it's like, let's have a big, well, I would call it almost a con job of pretending that everything's fine and we're doing great and look what we're doing here. They all love to show up at public events and drag out a couple of third or fourth graders and hand them some certificates and say, look at the great things we're doing in our school. And God forbid if one of our students should actually win a national award, which they do for time to time, or a state championship or an individual achievement of some kind. And rightfully so. It is right that these young people be given great credit. Our public representatives love to stand behind them. Give me a plaque, give me a shiny cup that I can hold and share. Welcome. Here's let it be known that the office of the mayor of the city of Manchester recognises whatever wonderful young man or woman. They love that. But you try telling them that there's 34 kids in a class at one of your schools. They don't want to talk about that too much. And some of them will actually downright lie about it. I mean, just to be very blunt, I know it's very sort of aggressive perhaps, but I have had the experience of, for instance, 2 years ago, I think it was, I went before the board, mayor and alderman, and I simply took the list of students in grades in each of our elementary schools. And I simply read them the number of kids in the class, the number of classes that were above 30 in the city. They were brand new, or at least the most recent figures. They were 3 weeks old or so when I read them. I just wanted the school board, the board of mayor and aldermen, to recognise that when they're singing and whistling and dancing and smiling and kissing each other about how great this whole thing is and how we're doing wonderfully and look at us now and we're the city of Manchester, tunk tunk tunk, isn't it great? I wanted them to know some of the truths. That yes, there are great things going on. Yes, there are people working very hard. The credit in the first place goes to the kids. Kids are resilient. Kids are great. We have great kids. Guess what? There are great kids everywhere if you give them a chance. If our kids were given the resources they actually deserve, they'd be doing even better. So taking nothing away from those kids, I wanted to go and tell them the places where they were falling short. Because there's a little Johnny in a class of 32 who simply gives up. He gets through September, he's falling behind. In October, he's lost the plot. By the end of October, he's done in. If he's a little spirited, perhaps he'll act out a little and tell the teacher, hey, I couldn't do it, I didn't do it. Because it's easier to do that in front of your friends than, when asked by the teacher to answer a question, sit there and say, sorry, I don't know it, I'm not that bright. So, which isn't, of course, the case. So we in those size classes, we're losing kids and doing them a disservice every day. I went before the board, mayor and alderman. I simply read the unbiased numbers, the objectively true numbers, objective in the sense that I hadn't manipulated anything. They were right off the sheets as given. And I had to listen to aldermen publicly speak about the fact that I had come out with that I had exaggerated the numbers, that I had distorted the numbers, which is very frustrating to me, because when I hear people saying that, and yet they won't take the opportunity to address it directly. It's not like we have a conversation privately and they say, Jim, you actually were incorrect here, here, and here, and here. Privately, all they'll say is, look, our hands are tied, there's nothing we can do about it, we have a tax cap and all that. Then they'll go in front of you, or they'll come on some show here in Manchester Public Television, and this is where I use the word lie, because it is a lie in the end, and lie to you, because when they say that I went before them and I distorted the numbers or exaggerated them, it's just a plain lie. So I find it very frustrating then that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Let me take one other example that occurred to me when I was thinking about this gentleman who is the whole program, this Mr. C, and I really. He's a nice enough person. I don't. This is not about him, and I don't ever want to make it about personalities. It's not as though, as I said, his heart is in the right place, and he's certainly passionate. But simply, shouting longest and loudest so you get to what you want is not right by me. I think about 5-6 years ago, there was, amongst the many other things and the programs that were lost, and there are a number of occasions that are sort of etched in my memory, and one of them is when I was the president of Hillside Middle School, and when we had the big cuts 5 or 6 years ago, 6 years ago now I think it was, and there was 164 positions eliminated, teachers eliminated. Now, there was some rehiring done, and the net figure, people want to argue back and forth whether it was 95 or 105 or whether 110 or whatever the net figure was that was fired in the end. But a huge number of people lost their jobs, and programs were eliminated across the schools. And just as I've often said, because it's easy sort of without getting into percentages, we eliminated 50%. I mean, by percentages, I mean more discrete numbers, but we got rid of half the English language. The English, by English language, I don't mean teaching English as a foreign language. I mean simply English grammar and learning to read and write. We eliminated 50% of the class time that students in our middle schools had to learn to read and write. 50% like that in one fell swoop. And there was nobody on the board of mayor and aldermen screaming about it. We have to do it, and we're stuck with a tax cap, and that's what we have to do, and I'm going to go along to get along, and no, I'm not voting to override that because I might get voted out of office by people who also don't know the truth of what's going on. So when I look at that, and one of the memories etched in my mind is being at Hillside Middle School when I was a PTO member, and it was the last day of school as the teachers, the day before the schools were to close for the year, for the summer, and the then assistant superintendent, who's now long gone, thankfully. Who also was part of the go along to get along and wasn't going to rock the boat and would never actually walk into a room and say, this is not right. He was fine saying, we'll make this work. So we'll have 42 kids in a math class. We'll make this work, Mr. Mayor. And I still am resentful about the people in the administration who went along with that and didn't say, no, that is not right. I had teachers who stood up and said things. Administrators, principals stood up and said things and got into trouble for doing so. But the people at the top of the Manchester School District kept their mouths shut because they had nice cushy jobs at more than 6 figures a year, and they knew bloody well that what was going on was damaging the Manchester schools and that it would take us years, maybe decades to recover. But they weren't going to rock the boat, because there was a bully of a mayor who was insisting on doing this because he had his own political ambitions to do things, and fully supported. For those of you who, this is not, the one man didn't do this. Let me be very clear for the umpteenth time about this. Fully supported by Democrats and Republicans across the board, and Democrats, Republicans, and whatever they might be, every flavour and slice and colour, went in lockstep and were okay with this. So when that was going on, I remember the occasion when somebody said there were about 80 or so teachers, or maybe 80 or 90, maybe closer to 90 teachers, sitting on tubular chairs in the school chairs in the gym. And they were having their end of year. They were about to go off to it was early in the morning. The school was empty because the kids had left the day before. It was the last day for teachers, and they were going to their classrooms to pick up their stuff and get ready to leave. And somebody said, would those of you who are not going to be here next year, who've been eliminated from this school, would you please stand up? And 25% of the teachers in the school stood up. Many of them with tears in their eyes, their co-workers, some of them crying. There were people who'd been there for 10, 12, 14 years, eliminated. There was one woman, the wonderful Nancy Gaddy, who had been at Hillside for 30 years. The woman who was she ran the school newspaper, or the school student club, student government. She ran the dance, everything that was on. Shows and theatre and everything that happened in that school, the Builders Club, all the different clubs that went on, the school store, everything that woman had run in that school. And she, after all her years in the Manchester School District, was sent packing. In her case, not eliminated completely, but after working in the same building for 30 years, she was told, thank you very much for coming in, but we're sending you to do a different job someplace else. And it was not the case that we didn't need her there. And again, I'm sorry for going on about this, but I want you to understand that in the face of all that stuff going on, and that's just the high level stuff sort of that's easy to get mad about and point out. I am convinced that if the citizens of Manchester ever were told the blunt truth about the programs that have been eliminated and the opportunities dismissed in the city of Manchester over the last decade, they'd be appalled. This is like the old story of the frog in the warm water, and your water gets warmer and warmer and warmer, and he doesn't notice it until he ends up cooked in it. So we've had debt by 1,000 cuts. And I am fine with the people who want to say there's great things going on. And I know one of my friends in the school board says he likes to make the point, and he's correct.
I'll answer it.
Okay. I got a call coming in?
I'll answer it.
Okay, thanks. So I'm fine with people saying that you can get an excellent education in the city of Manchester. Of course you can. There are people who get excellent educations in the city of Manchester. No question about it. My kids have had a pretty good education in the city of Manchester. I've got somebody calling up here. Let me just grab this 1 second. Go ahead, caller. You're online. Hello.
Hi, Jim.
Hi. Who's this?
Phil.
Hey, Phil. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Happy Thanksgiving, since I didn't see you.
Yeah, you too, and to your family.
Thank you. Likewise. What's going on?
I hope you don't mind if I piggyback on some of the things you've been saying.
Please.
Because when you said if people really knew what was going on,
right,
they'd probably have their get their dander up.
Right.
Just want to, and you've already mentioned them, but I'd like to elaborate just a little bit.
Okay.
You talked about 50 teachers being sent home. When we had those massive cuts.
Right.
And it's true that did happen. And they weren't sent home because they weren't needed. They weren't sent home because they weren't doing a good job. They were just sent home because we couldn't afford them.
Right. Just to correct you on one thing, it was 164 teachers, and there were there was more rehires, but the net loss, depending on who you ask, was somewhere between 95 and 110 of actual eliminated people.
Okay, so we know it's a massive cut.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try and tie all these things together.
Right.
So we know there was a massive cut, and they were needed, and they were doing a good job. I'll be up front. I'm a Matt Corshane fan, and I'm a Hope fan.
Okay.
But that being said, if the criteria to get money from the alderman is to prove that your program works, but we have 10 or 15 programs that work.
Right.
You could start with alternative placements in the middle school. We've had parents go to a school board and say that there's schools that don't have any speech and language. All those things work.
Right.
So if they're really saying, let's fund it because it works, there's a list from the sky to the floor of things that work that we're not funding.
I agree.
And whether it's the former mayor or the new mayor or the old board or the new board, it's the same old thing. It's not getting done.
I agree.
All right, that being said, then another thing last night that came up at the school board meeting was this insurance thing, and I'm stuck on it.
Right, and I'm
stuck on it for good reason.
Right, and let me just say, Phil, on my little note here in front of me, under the votes, the second item, the first thing was the whole program. The second item was the healthcare issue. But go ahead.
Right. Okay. So we talk about we'd like to have these things, but we can't fund them. And I'll tie this in, and I've spoken with Committee Man Ambrosi numerous times about this, so I'm not, going selling her under the bridge, so to speak.
Right.
But one of her comments was, when they were going to take the insurance away from the school board, was, am I supposed to go home and tell my husband we don't have health insurance now?
Right.
It's exactly what you're supposed to tell him.
Right.
Because the kids need not only lost their insurance, but went home and told their husbands and wives and children, not only did we lose our insurance, we lost our paycheck.
Yes.
And not because I'm not doing a good job, just because we can't afford it. So I'm making the analogy, if you can't afford them, then you definitely cannot afford insurance for the school board.
Right.
And now when you try to get a number for the school board, they'll have Anthem come in and tell you what they spend. 30% is on orthopedic, 20% is on diabetes, 10% is on mental health, whatever it is. FERPA doesn't count then.
Right.
Or HIPAA, whichever one it is. One's education, one's medicine.
Right.
But the point being, we don't even know how much we spend on the school board.
Right.
Now, they can't go into non-public and just come up with a figure, not who it's spent on, but what's the total. So how can a board reasonably vote to support a budget item that they have no idea what it costs? It's
Right.
just a wild guess.
Right.
Well, it's really not a wild guess, because you could have an educated guess. We know prescriptions are expensive, right?
Right.
And if you have a family of 5, 6, 7, or if you have your husband and wife, or whatever it may be, we know procedures, we know operations, we know doctor visits, we know health care is extremely expensive, and we're self-insured.
Right.
So the point being, it's a big-ticket item. So if they weren't getting that, and these are people that live, and, after saying, am I supposed to tell my husband we don't have health insurance, they purchase $1 million home in Manchester. There's not many $1 million homes in Manchester.
Right.
So yeah, you're supposed to tell them that. I'm not getting the insurance anymore.
Right.
And other people are supposed to say, I have a private practice, I'm a doctor, but we're not going to get health insurance anymore from the city. Because children in all these elementary schools need social workers. They need guidance counselors. They need, like you said, in the middle schools, they need to have reading and writing separated. We know that works. The scores went way up when it was separated.
Right.
It's common sense. You double the time, you double the effort, you double the resources, you probably will get double the results. And we did. So the data's there. It's the will that isn't there.
Right.
The will is not there to do it. And whether it's the former mayor, the new mayor, the old board, the new board, it's the same discussion. And the needle moves, but it only moves, it doesn't move to really affect a child's life.
Right.
And it's not about the teachers not having a contract. That's a whole other thing. It's not about the salary. Forget all that. It's about the haves having it,
Right.
elected officials with their pensions and the $1 million homes and the letters after their name and their private practices, and the have-nots, the students getting on the bus, the students with special needs, the student that wants to excel in algebra but there's not enough room in that class, or that class is overcrowded,
Absolutely.
or whatever the case may be, or the student that may be really, really just wants to get into that extra language course, a foreign language.
Right.
We don't have foreign languages in the middle school. We have one teacher that teaches Spanish. That's not a foreign language program.
Right.
That's
Right.
better than what we used to have, but it's so far away from what we should have or need or these kids deserve that it's not even close.
Right. But it
So
allows.
after watching... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So no, you're absolutely right, and everything that you said, I agree 100%. And you were eloquent in the way you put it. We're 100% agreed. I am. My main point tonight, and all of the points you made were right too. My main point tonight had to do with I'm so annoyed at the idea, this postage stamp thing of, and again, I'm not an anti McElshane person or the whole program or anything else, but when I see that this is the method you have to, is this the way that people, in the end, what they're offering is a pittance anyway against the size of the problem, but it makes them all feel good, so they can say, we did this. I've had aldermen say to me, very passionately, that West High School needs, these kids at West High School need this, etc. Of course they do, Mr. Alderman. I agree with you 100%. Do you want to come with me and I'll show you some of the kids with the tears in their eyes, or the beautiful faces looking up at you saying, why can't I have a math class? Why can't I do algebra? Why can't I have a foreign language? They don't give a damn about them. They just want to feel good about, it's just horrendous. It's one, I get so mad about it, as you know.
Right. Well, how about this for a question then, Jim, that we could ask them back? And I agree. They need the whole program, and like I told you at the beginning, I support Matt Courchain. I think he does a great job. So when the aldermen say, we really need this, or a school board member fights for it, say, okay, do they need it as much or more than you need your insurance?
Right.
There you go. We'll give the money to Hope. you don't get insurance. I know there's at least 30,000. There might be 3 million or 30 million. We don't know.
Right.
But are you willing to give that up?
Right.
And then we'll have it for the whole program, and we'll have it for the other kids.
Well,
by the way, using that analogy, here are all the other programs we need.
Right.
Are you ready to go out on the limb and fund those?
Right.
But, and now I'm going to go off just a little bit, and then I'll stop.
Yeah.
You know, there's a divide on the board. There's different ideological positions and different parties. I know it's nonpartisan, but we all know what's going on. And it's easy to go after the other side or the other guy, and I'm better than this guy, or I believe in this more, or I'm going to work for the students more. But here's my pet peeve, and you already know what I'm going to say. It's the people, and I'll use another name because he's in my ward, and he's our elected official, Dave Scannell.
Yeah.
He's told me, he said it when he ran for office, that he's against the school board members having insurance.
Right.
Well, he had an opportunity last night. I mean, he voted, you know, the way I would want him to vote.
Yeah.
So good for you. But did he give his eloquent speeches and stick up for it or fight for it? No.
Right.
So my point being, the silence is worse than anything. And it legitimizes people that their side's fighting against this side and this. Well, guess what? Some of the people that I have differences with, I also agree on certain things with them. They don't take the insurance. They don't believe it should be there.
Right. Well, I on this on a couple of topics, both of them, both the health insurance topic and on the topic of the whole program, I find myself when I look at the vote on the healthcare thing, it was the people who voted in favour of changing the amount that they would get at least, or the amount that the city would have to pay for it, were Scannell, Freeman, Gerard, Terrio, Lahou, and Beaudry. And in this case, though, I agree with their position as opposed to the position of Avar, DeRochers, Long, Brochy, George, Want, Bergeron, and Craig. So, and again, on the other with regard to the whole program, I also find myself voting. If I were voting, I'd be voting alongside the motion to table it, which was Gerard, Terrio, Lahou, Beaudry, Avar, George, and Freeman, and against Craig, DeRochers, Long, and Brochy, Scannell, Want, and Bergeron. And I differ from you in one regard with regard to the whole program is that I am not as benevolent as you are about that. First of all, it's not a program. I just, the idea that one person who happens to be the nephew of an alderman who is, as I've said now for the third time tonight, passionate about what he would like to do and forceful, but this person, this program, let's call whatever way you want to call it, has not had a stellar record. There's a lot of shining up being done here to make this thing look like a shiny gem that it is not. Right? And there are people, as you pointed out, there are 15 such programs. I think of people all over the city who have better qualifications, have done more for longer, with more kids, with better results, and none of them are putting their hand out to the city of Manchester. Some of them are a lot less off than others, and they're not putting their hand out saying, give me 30,000 a year so I can work with 15 kids someplace. So, you know, they're working with hundreds for free.
I'm not going to go down the road. As you know, I'm friends with Matt. I'm friends with his family. I appreciate the work that Matt has done. But I'll end with this, and I'll let you continue your show. The fact that you and I in the school districts are having a conversation about an alternative program in a high school,
right?
That tells you where we're at. We shouldn't even be having that conversation.
Right. The program should be there.
Matt Gorshane should have been hired, or somebody like him, 20 years ago. It was Jim Schubert's PASS program. We got rid of it.
Right.
There should be 5 PASS programs now.
Right.
It shouldn't even be a discussion. We're talking about how much they should pay for their insurance. Shouldn't even be a discussion.
Right.
If and until all the needs of the students are met. Once all the needs of the students are met, then we can talk about how much it costs to help the school board members have insurance.
Agreed, Phil.
Listen, they're willy-nilly ideas that it's going to increase the pool and the better candidates. Take a team picture and compare it to a school board that didn't have health insurance.
Right.
There's no difference.
Yeah,
and in fact, the old ones are probably better.
Right, yeah.
So it's the paradigm that's set up that has people like you and I even talking about Matt Gorshane and the whole program, or how much they should pay for their insurance. What we should be saying is there is no insurance. If you don't want to run, go home. And we don't need a whole program because all our programs are all set.
Right.
And Matt, if you'd like to work with us, we'd love to have you.
Right. Absolutely. I agree.
So, all right.
Thank you, Phil.
Thank you for doing your show, too.
Thank you for coming on. You're a good man. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, talk about being on a limb. Just again, I'm not a shy person, and I've got big shoulders, and I can carry it. When Phil says about that Matt Crushane and his family being friends, etc. Matt's uncles are friends of mine. They're good people. They et cetera, et cetera. So this is not easy for me either. But again, I have to be consistent. Just like there are people when on the school board that I would often find myself because being standing alongside, and I know that they're out there doing their thing and working, trying to make this work, etc. But I'm not looking for any kudos here, other than I have no problem calling out my friends on the school board, even though it is uncomfortable. It's not nice to have to go off the air and then be on the street tomorrow, the next day, and someone says, "I heard you were talking about me." And I like to try and keep away from, as you all know, if you watch this program, I don't go after people very often, at least. But one has to be true to oneself, and so I like to think that I call it the way I see it, and so. Yes. So this the issue from last night. There were numerous roll call votes again and again. I'm told the meeting went on quite a while. It's all very very troubling. I hope that I think the answer again might be for just people need to pay attention and know what's going on, and keep after their public representatives. In the end, we just need to look at some of these people, and if they're not the right person for the role, we need to move them on. In the end, there's way too much in Manchester. There's way too much inside the Beltway. There's way too much insider knowledge, and everybody's comfy, and no one wants to rock the boat because they're going to upset somebody, and so. In the end, we have to do what we have to do, and people should do the right thing. I look at the Manchester Proud thing, and by the way, you should go on Manchester Proud's website. They have some events coming up soon. Actually, there's one tomorrow, now that I think about it, on November 28th at... let me see, just quickly, where are we? Yeah, so at Highland Goffs Falls. On the 28th, there's a family listening session for 6 to 7. But you do have to RSVP, because I think if nobody RSVPs, I don't know if people will all go or not, or will they hold it or not if there's no one going. But if you jump on the website, manchesterproud.org, and go to events, and you'll find them. But and then Bakersville has got a family listening session on the following day, the 29th, which is on Thursday. There's one from 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and then there's another one. You'll have to look it up. Bakersville support staff is 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. Families 8:30 to 9:30 in the morning, and then on the 30th there's a Southside listening session from right during the day, 7 a.m. right through to 2:20, and Highland Goffs Falls on December 3rd has got a listening session from 8 a.m. to 2:50. So they're going through the schools. You can look at this and see these things on Manchester Proud on the Manchester Proud website. So please go out there and have a look at this. Please talk to your school board and board mayor and alderman, and they just need to be constantly reminded that our schools deserve better than what they're getting today. There's also while I have it here, we have the coffee and donuts thing coming up for. If I can go to home on here, let me see. Can't find it, of course, because I'm trying to get to it now in a hurry. But where are we? Infamous MST Creative School. Can't find it right now. So here it is. So December 5th and 6th, which is next week. The coffee with the and conversations with the superintendent. December 5th, Highland Goff Falls at 7:30 a.m. And then again on the following day, December 6th, at the middle school at Parkside. over on Parkside Ave at 4:30 in the afternoon, and then that'll be the last of the listening sessions with the superintendent until the beginning of next year. So again, December 5th at 7:30 at Highland Golf Falls, December 6th at 4:30 p.m. at Parkside. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you to Phil for calling in, and he makes wonderful points, and he's dead right. You know, these postage stamp things have to stop. This, you know, fund the schools properly, give the students and families of Manchester a chance to excel, let them shine, take the boot off their necks, let them have what they need in order to excel, and then the school system can match the wonderful things that are going on in the rest of the city. We've so many wonderful things. Elm Street is alive at night time with restaurants and all kinds of wonderful activities going on. The art scene is lively here, the music, culture. There's so many things going on in the city of Manchester. Business, the technology businesses, that we could go on and on and on. And areas around the city have all kinds of wonderful things going on. And in the middle of it, we have the least well-funded school system in the state of New Hampshire. That's the pace that has to change, and we'll keep shouting and keep pushing. And in the meantime, you're invited to join the push anytime. Put your shoulder to that wheel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I look forward to speaking to you again on this time next week. All the best now. Bye-bye.